Welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor, and I'm joined today by my guest, Kay Solanki. Kay is a trusted strategist to owner directors, seasoned executives, and board professionals in Australia and beyond. She's the founder of Coachtique, don't you love the name? A boutique coaching and advisory firm that helps high-performing leaders navigate business succession, executive evolution, and portfolio career transition. After successfully exiting a 20-year entrepreneurial venture and an executive career, Kay now works behind the scenes with elite leaders to help them sharpen strategy, commercialise their influence, and build legacies that outlast any single title or role. How's that for clarity of purpose? She's also a Vistage peer advisory group chair, board advisor, and investor with Epic Angels, and regularly works with leadership teams navigating complexity, performance plateaus, and the pressure of growth. Welcome, Kay.
What a fantastic introduction. Thank you, Ingrid. So pleased to be here today with you.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. And I know we've kind of alluded at a high level to your very interesting career journey, but yours is filled with small business advocacy experience and solid leadership. Can you share your career journey with the listeners to start us off?
Yeah, I can do. It's quite a long time, I can tell you that. So I became an accidental entrepreneur in my mid-20s. So at that time, I was actually working in the business advisory space, working for the Chamber of Commerce, who's doing business improvement, doing quality, the ISO world. Lots of you might know that world. And I stumbled into event planning, from doing private events of friends and family. And before you knew it, I was asked to do, paid events. So I ran that business, grew it from 2 people to 300 staff. A journey that took me internationally, 20 plus years. It became my baby. I was eating, breathing, sleeping my business. And yeah, it gave me a front row seat at what it's like to create, to grow, and to really exit a business, but also what all the different, road humps along the way around creating strategic partnerships, the legal side, the compliance side, how to grow culture in a business, how to go from, operating from a small kind of garage, which a lot of, businesses start that way, into big commercial premises, and then, almost like a deep dream come true, start getting contracts from large international players, names that you know. Most of us would know from an international scene. And then I came to Australia in 2013, actually, and I fell in love with the country. I was, all about burnout. I was definitely burnt out by that time because I was burning the candle at both ends, and I was working, building the business. A reputation was carrying it, and I didn't want to let anything go. So I came to Australia for a break and fell in love with the climate. I've always said I think if I ever moved country, I'd come to Australia. And who knew it? Here I am, like 2 years after that, I went back after that holiday. I said to my husband, let's put an application in to move. 2 years later, I decided to emigrate, and I was actually running a business remotely at that time. So I ran it from here. He was still in a different country. And yeah, I decided to exit at that time. So I guess, and I've been lucky enough because I wasn't just operating from a business owner perspective. I was actually advising other businesses because I was consulting at the same time. So I've got sort of the best of both worlds. And in the consulting game, I was actually working with larger entities and developing their leadership teams and developing their quality systems. So I kind of had a backdoor entry into, how to build business infrastructure, how to do strategy, how to build leadership capability. But, things are different for a small business environment. It's not quite the same. You can't yes, you can take concepts from the corporate world, but you can't actually just copy and paste into the small business world. So I guess and I've always been coaching, I guess, as well. I was doing coaching as a hobby when I was back in the UK, and I decided to formalise those qualifications when I came to Australia. And I've always sort of been in the mentoring and coaching space, and then I became a director of a coaching institute, then handling Asia Pacific clients, large entity clients, and actually coaching in behind the scenes as well. So as I came to Australia, I guess I went back from being a small business owner into corporate world, and then back. I did a U-turn, came straight back. And I started, coaching executives who were then transitioning out of corporate world, starting their own entrepreneurship ventures, and I was equipped. I knew that world very, very well. Everything that I was trying to do, I had to do for myself when I moved countries. But having the strength of the experience behind you to talk to just started resonating in people's worlds. And I realized that, there came a point in time when I realized that actually doing this, there's a bit of magic. Sometimes there's a bit of magic that happens one-to-one, but there's another level of magic that happens when you get a whole bunch of people with the same kind of backgrounds in the room. Hence my work, my kind of journey into Vistage and peer advisory. So now I sit as a chair for Vistage. I'm an executive coach for a group of business owners at different stages of their journey. And then I also sit with them once a month, and we workshop all the real issues they face as business owners or as senior executives or leaders in those businesses. So that's an enriching space too. So I get to do that, and then I help other business owners build succession beyond them. So in a small business world, often we think about the word succession as I'm leaving my seat, I need to find a replacement. This is not that. This is really about building a business that can last even day to day without you. And small business owners are not so great at that.
Well, we're going to dive into that because there's some compelling data as well that supports everything that you're about. And even though you've got that really solid, thorough, small business, large corporate, insight, advisory, ISO stuff, you've got all of that to add into the mix. It seems that you're beautifully poised right now to be doing the work that you are, which brings me to Vistage, because you kind of touched on it just then. I mean, as a Vistage chair, you have this unique view across a variety of businesses. What are some of the things, Kay, that you're noticing as some of the common challenges that business owners are facing in the current climate?
Yes, Ingrid. I would say one of the key ones that keeps cropping up recently is about leading a team of employees across generations. We've got the younger generation coming upstream into business as employees and as would-be leaders, right? And their philosophy of the world is slightly different to, how some of us might have, experienced our worlds. Not giving away my age, but hey. So there is the reoccurring conversation around how do we best navigate that. There's this clashes of working styles that are at play. There is just expectations of what they expect and how do we fulfill on that, or do we fulfill on that or not. So there's the intergenerational part at play. There's the advancing technology, AI comes up a lot. For some that becomes almost like, not AI again type of thing. For others it's like, no, I need to lean in, I need to understand how this works, how my business can evolve, how we can integrate it into the way that we operate. Without losing sight of what they're actually about and not being sidetracked by, the shiny object syndrome. They're two key ones that come up. And also there's one that probably nobody really mentions is the owner's evolution, their personal evolution and what they want. How do they go about navigating that? They've built this thing, this business, or they're leaders in a business, and well, how do I grapple with what I want and where my own identity is being shaped? And is that where I want to go?
Well, those three things that you talked about there, I think, some large business can relate to those, but I loved what you said finally, which was about the owner's evolution. Let's talk first about leading across generations. So we've now got, I think, 5, and soon we'll have 6 generations in the workplace. So we go from baby boomer, to Gen X, through to Gen Y, millennials, Gen Z, and then we'll have, what are they calling, Alpha, Gen Alpha.
Alpha.
I think is the one after that. But Gen Z is really, I think, one to watch. They fill me with a lot of optimism because they're very different to millennials in that they come to work, or my understanding is that they come to work with a very clear understanding that they want a portfolio career, that they want opportunities faster, that they're almost, demanding that they have opportunities at a greater speed, at a quicker speed, that they're ready for it, that they're up for it, that they also want to have or want to work in a way that connects to their personal purpose. So millennials were really attracted to companies that had a purpose that they resonated with, whereas Zeds are coming in very clear about their personal purpose, and it's whether that company is going to facilitate them to be able to live that purpose or not, which presents a whole host of challenges for existing businesses. And then you've got your other generations that have a lot to offer. What's your advice on helping businesses, whether they be large corporates or smaller businesses, to lead through the generations?
It's a big topic, Ingrid, but big there's some things that really stand out to me in the work that I do. I do a lot of work around vision, purpose for a business, and how that becomes almost like a point of attraction for the right employees. I always say, right person, right seat, right bus. And if you follow that very simplistic, analogy, the right bus often is the casing of a business, right? The vision, the purpose, the operations, and how what's the actual brand this business carries, right? In the way. And that's often an outward manifestation of the culture that it's trying to portray. And businesses that have that are very clear about who they are and the kind of person that will thrive in that business. And the kind of second tier to that, which is a right seat, is having good clarity on roles. We call it role clarity in the work that I do. It's a simple concept, but not always well articulated in many businesses. It's around understanding what type of person, and this is really going beyond role descriptions. It's actually role profiling. What are the accountabilities for somebody that sits in this particular seat? What kind of person would thrive here? What are the systems that actually operate for this particular role? And do we have these well articulated? And what are the boundaries for this role? Decision making. So some clarity around these 3 or 4 principles allows a person to go, right, well, is this something that I want to sign up for? And that, encased with the culture of a business, helps somebody understand, actually, am I aligned with this? Is it somewhere I can see myself working? The principles and the ethos of the culture, does that resonate? And that's like your first level check, right? If I have these things, and these are the sorts of things that the younger generation are looking at, It's not just the title of the job. Titles don't matter as much. It's what's underneath that title. How does this business actually orchestrate itself? And when I'm there at day 30, am I going to feel the same about this company as I do on day 1?
Isn't that interesting, Kay, that I mean, that's an incredibly authentic view of relationships in general. So how is this? It might all look good on the surface, but actually, what's the substance here? And is what I'm experiencing early on going to continue on? I mean, I find that that's one of the reasons why I happen to love Gen Z. I just find that they've kind of been to the circus. They've seen the magic show, and they kind of know how it works. They know how the tricks are done, and they want something that they can believe in. They want something that they can count on. They want something that feels right for them, because they're quite clear about what is right for them, and so they want the same, like they have the same expectation of their employer. Okay, so we've talked about, some of that. So right person, right seat, right bus, being really clear as an organisation about your brand, making sure that there's clarity of role. And you're right, what can go wrong? I mean, that's one of the fundamentals. And yet, whenever you find dysfunction in a team, role clarity is, one of those things. And how you said about the AI, I want to go into some stats in a subsequent question around leadership and the pipeline of leadership, which is really what you really help businesses to establish. But AI is one of those things that they're saying that in a certain set of statistics, about 80% of CEOs are actually really excited about the possibilities of AI producing efficiency benefits to them, improving systems and processes, and yet there's a disconnect in their direct reports towards AI. There's a little bit of hesitation, there's some uncertainty, there's some mistrust there. What are the sorts of conversations that your business owners are having with their teams about AI, or do they need to have more or different or better conversations?
Yeah, I mean, having a conversation never stops. AI is such an evolving field. The word consultation comes to my mind, right? Involving your people and having conversations about even what you're thinking about in terms of how you're thinking about adopting AI in your business is a good starting point. Because often in traditional leadership structures, the leaders decide, and then the workforce does. Very little consultation happens to, like a stakeholder consultation piece. Your employees are your stakeholders. They're the best people to help you make your business, build the momentum in your business. So what is it that you can do to get insights from them that's going to help shape something that they're going to have to use? And sometimes, our employees are so, you've got so much richness in the knowledge there. We don't tap into it enough. Yeah. So I would encourage a lot of business owners to ask your staff and ask your teams, we're thinking about introducing more AI into this business. Where do you think, where's the best fit for us? Where do you think? What are you seeing? What are you reading? What are you learning? Because everybody that's into this space will come to the table with either an opinion for or against, or an idea of ways you can actually implement this. And I guess, there's AI experts, there's experts one day, not experts the next day, because things are evolving so much. I think you have to ask the question of what is going to give us the best leverage in the business. And there's a balance between investment, time implementation, and actual resource to do it. Because if you wanted to, you can. There's just so many places you can go with this. The longevity of something has to be standing, right? You have to think about anything that we adopt here. Is it just for the short term, or is it going to give us a long-term gain and a long-term leverage? It's going to put us in a long-term leverage solution. I'm not mistaken, Ingrid. There's going to be a time, in the workforce, there's going to be us, robots, and automation. And the three of those are going to be the new business structure. Yeah. So I guess if you take that lens, starting to think about, with those three things, where would I start, and which one is going to give you the biggest leverage here and now? Robotics is a little bit further away down the line, but automations is here. There's ways you can automate, there's so much stuff out there for just your customer service elements in the business. There's small things you can put into place for that. In the work I do, a lot of it's about personalization, the way I handle my customers.
Yes.
There's a way that every business should be able to do that, even ones that are servicing lots and lots of clients in a repetitive form, right? Everybody's going to be experiencing or wanting, if my wish is to receive all my deliveries on a Saturday morning, or receive my customer care calls on a Friday evening, a business will have to at some point find a way of how they might do that. And there are solutions out in the marketplace that can help do some of that. I guess there's a fear, from a lot of business owners, like, how do I do this? I know what the kind of things that I want to implement, but how do I do this? And my encouragement to them is go back to what I said earlier, where is either there's a bottleneck in the business or a point where you can get the biggest leverage. If I answered those two questions, my next question is, can AI help me? And my third question is, okay, how?
One of the things that strikes me when you speak is the clarity and absolute. I can tell that everything that you say comes from really solid experience, and so it strikes me that the clarity and simplicity with which you explain some of these concepts and highlight what owners need to to focus on speaks so loudly to me as to why you're in the position that you are as a Vistage chair, and your people in your group are very, very fortunate indeed. Can you speak a little bit more about the owner's evolution? You know how you said we often think that it's about just, who's going to take over, when I move on. But you said it's a lot deeper than that. It's about the everyday perpetuity of a business. Its ability to keep going on an everyday level. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I think that term is one that, you could even trademark. The owner's evolution. I think that's really, it's a really important concept.
It's funny you should say that. Just a side note here. My podcast, I talk about less ego, more evolution. And it's all about that. It's about everything that we can do and that's about the owner's evolution, the business's evolution, the team's evolution, the leadership evolution. There's all sorts of topics I talk about there, and they all are grounded in this kind of conversation from experience.
Yes.
So the owner's evolution is something that I experienced myself, and then I saw it in other people, and that came from my work of two hats: one of being a coach and learning what actually a coach is.
Yes.
And the other is, having managed and advised lots of businesses of all sizes.
Yes.
And in both those spaces, there is the business as an entity that goes through changes, and evolution, I guess. And then there's the individual, the person that has their own deep-seated needs of what they're trying to do, what they actually want from this experience, how the experience starts being shaped for them versus they start out shaping it, then it starts getting shaped for them, and then they realize, actually, I'm going in the wrong direction. I actually need to start shaping again. And that concept is something I called leader shaping. So it's a little bit different to leadership, and it's about shaping. It's a philosophy that I operate in my practice, and I help some of my clients understand that philosophy of how they can shape what they're doing, who they're being. And it's a little bit more than systems and processes. It's a little bit more than just, think of it as a gym for yourself. This is like a bigger gym that's taking care of who you want to be, what is it that you want for yourself, your family, all of that. What is it that your business needs? What are your aspirations for the future? But how do you mesh them all together? And how does that shape your day-to-day?
That's very rich. that's and deep when it comes to the practice of leader shaping. If I was you know how you said about the owner's evolution, if I was the owner of a business now and I'm looking across my leadership team, what are some of the things that I could be putting in place in order to shape the leaders of the future, to ensure that there was a bit more of a leadership pipeline? And we'll talk about that in more depth in a subsequent question. But let's now just look at, okay, now that we're talking about leader shaping, I love that phrase. I think that's absolute gold. So we're talking
That's
about
what
owner's evolution, big tick there, leader shaping, love that. But if I'm the owner of a business at the moment, and let's just say I only have maybe 3 or 4 key functional leaders, what should I be doing, or what could I be doing to start to shape those leaders and the leaders to come?
there's a couple of things that come to my mind. There's the person and there's the role. Often we want a leader that performs this particular role. You go back to the role clarity, you've got job descriptions, and that's the thing that we hang the performance and the expectation to. But a good place to start for a leadership team, and this happens in corporate all of the time, right? You do these personality assessment tests, but the thing is, that's all you do. You do them and you analyze them. You never use them in practice.
Yeah.
And in the work I do, we use that in practice. We understand who is it sitting around the table with me. What are these profiles telling me about them? And then having a conversation with these people saying, all right, I see you're good at this, or this is your need. And the reason why we clash is because my need for detail is stronger than your need for detail, or you're about collaboration. Therefore, we clash because I start asking questions about the detail side of things, and you're asking about, well, who have you asked, and who did we consult? So, understanding the nuances of the people. And I talk about person all the time, right? It's a big part of professional development for me and business improvement. Understand who's sitting around the table, but then go back to role clarity. Have I set clear role clarity for these people? And are they aligned with me? And do they understand my business in terms of my vision and the purpose of this business? Because if you're setting the context of, and are they aligned? We talked about the younger generation being aligned, but are your leaders aligned to that?
Yeah.
And then think of them, that's a team, right? Going back to team development, what makes a team hum really, really well? Good communication, clear boundaries, clear expectations, a regular dialogue, holding each other accountable for the things that we do well, don't do so well, and not using it from a beating of a stick on your head, but having an open adult conversation saying, well, today I'm going to lean into your profile and your need for detail. I thought on that particular project you didn't do it, that didn't happen. So using these things, these mechanisms in your business to have tough conversations sometimes, but also using those same mechanisms to improve performance, turn everything up a notch.
Yeah.
Right? So there's something called the team model that I work with in the work that I do, and one of the key fundamentals of that is we get a leadership team together, or those that we think are going to be in the leadership, and we help them understand you are a team, you're not a set of individuals, and then growing them to a point where, or nurturing them, I would say, to a point where the leader can start offloading some of that executive leadership responsibilities. And that's the next step for the leader the owner to step away from the business and grow this very competent team who feel that they've been nurtured and they've got the right support, and they can make the decisions that can support a business evolve. and the person part of them forms part of their performance as well as the job performance part of it.
Yeah. Yep. That's beautifully explained there, because I think if you know who's around the table and then you utilize that to lean into the individual's strengths depending on the project or the objectives or the focus of the business, the priorities of the business, what the business has to achieve, then it becomes less about the personalities and it becomes more about the qualities of each of the team members. And I also really appreciated how you said then about it. Then it becomes about offloading some of those executive competencies to that next level down, so that you're building that bench strength, so that when it comes time, there's a history of performance, there's a history and a successful track record of experience, and then that developing expertise. So it's not really about, well, now it's time, you'd better get up to speed really quickly. Like, we're already all up to speed to a varying degree with those executive competencies, and then when it does come time, there's just a natural sort of stepping into it, which is, maybe it's the owner's evolution.
It is the owner's evolution, and that's a tough journey. I have to often segregate the work between work. Well, I do. I form, if there's more than one owner, I form an ownership team, and I help the ownership team work in the same way as the leadership team. We put team charters together. We sit down and work out what the expectations are of each other. We'll do an assessment of their personalities. We will, articulate what behaviours and values they actually value, what they don't value, and how they show up in the way that they conduct themselves in meetings, and actually call it out and say, hey. But we don't say, you're being a such and such. We actually say, we agreed either our values, that value was transgressed because you did that, or it might be that, my role hat or my role stack is this and this, and you actually came in and did that, and that's my role. Actually, accountability, not yours. So being very clear, and it's, I've seen it. I've been living this new kind of the owner's evolution world, especially more so in the last couple of years, and that's the work. Doesn't happen anywhere else, Ingrid. Because it all starts, they say everything starts at the top, whether it's the chair, it's in a business, in a private business entity world,
yes,
it's them. Everything rests with them, and they have very little support outside of their business. They might have friends, and they might have business acquaintances they can talk to some of the things about, but they don't actually have a sounding board or somewhere where they can go to and go, right, I'm kind of stuck on how to take this business, and I'm evolving myself, and my business is evolving. I'm either stuck or I want to do something different with this business, but I feel like so tied to this, I can't do anything. So this conversation about owner's evolution or the business's evolution it's like, okay, hey, what's that, Kay? Will you help me understand what this is? Because I've never heard that terminology before.
Yeah.
And then I start introducing them slowly to some of the concepts that I spoke about earlier. And then I know and they know when we strike a chord, and they hear it in the language, they hear it in the way that I'm trying to explain things, that they go, oh, is that what's going on for me? I'm going through it in my own evolution, and I've never thought to call it that, or never even recognise it's that. And these are the things that are shaping it, and these are the things that are influencing it. And I actually need to do something about this. So one of the things I say, Ingrid, is succession is not for when you're ready to exit. Succession is for a business or in the private space. Well, actually, it can be corporate space too. Build it as you're doing your day-to-day. That should be a succession mindset should be the way you do business.
A succession mindset should be the way that you do business. Wow. So tell me how that would play out in a week. So if my business had a succession mindset, because I think you're right. Like it shouldn't be, we shouldn't approach, especially in private business, we shouldn't approach succession planning as if we're about to exit the business and someone's leaving or someone's going to retire or sell the business or whatever. If we have a succession mindset, what should a week kind of look like that's embodying a succession mindset? And what are some of the benefits that an owner or that leadership team would experience if they embrace that succession mindset?
Right. I think in a week you'd have a good. Well, first and foremost, you wouldn't be dreading to go to work. You wouldn't be thinking, "Oh my God, I've got 20 million things and I have to do them all." It would be, "I've got good infrastructure in place. I've built it. I've got good capability in my leadership team, and they know what they're doing." So there'd be a cadence of the leadership team meeting. Obviously, they look at what are the key accountabilities, how am I delivering on them, what are the bottlenecks, is there anything that I need to know that's happening in your area? Because often, if I'm working in dispatch or engineering, production, the two don't talk. I'm doing my bit, you're doing your bit, and things appear on paper as to how we're doing together. This way, no, I want to know, or we should all, as leaders, want to know what each of the departments in this business are doing, even if it's a business of 10 people. Think of it this way, right? Everybody's clear in that world that they're wearing different hats. And the leadership, one day you might be on a Monday, you might be wearing your leadership hat, having a leadership team meeting. And there's a cadence for what you might talk about there. And how you make decisions there and how you handle bottlenecks. And then you might then step out of that meeting, go to your teams, and they'll have clarity because they have the leadership team will build a strategy, right? That big word strategy, not always the best word to use, I might add, because it has so many connotations. So that team will set the strategy annually for this business, and they'll have a quarterly cadence that they'll review it. But weekly, these teams will be going, right, we've got some targets or some goals that we want to set against this. How are we doing? I've got accountability for one area, you've got an accountability for another area, and in line with the role clarity, they'll go back to their teams, and the teams will have their own goals that align with the business or the function's goals. But they'll have absolute clarity about what they're doing, what they have to report, how do they discuss when they have bottlenecks. Yeah. And it's more of I call it the silent ring of control. And it helps everybody understand what they need to do, what the cadence for communication is, how do we know when things are going wrong, and how do we better still, how do we tackle things when things go wrong? So every week, every function, every team will have a little catch up, and they'll all know, right, how are we tracking, and it's a dialogue. But also there'll be key success measures that they have put together, like if we're doing really well as a team, or if we're doing well as a function, this is what good looks like for us. And that good looks like for us doesn't always come from above. It comes as a collaborative discourse.
Yes.
I agree, right, I think this is what we should measure, and if that's not working for us, we need to change. But there's a regular communication that happens, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, and then it all feeds back into the bigger picture. And role clarity is absolutely at the core. Like I said, everybody understands and they're clear about what hat am I wearing, what seat am I sitting in, what does good look like in this seat, what are the systems that support this, and each team will look after their own systems. So the mini systems will kick into the macro systems, which helps the business keep going. So you always work. There's a continuous improvement mindset that sits in the succession work that you need everybody in the business to understand and be on the bus for.
I love the way that you explain things, and I absolutely love the understanding that each seat within a function or each role has a what good looks like attached to it. So the team itself has, understands what good looks like for the team in relationship to what it is that they're trying to achieve, which gives a clear indication of the how. It's that beautiful journey. They understand the what, and that's what a lot of businesses focus on, is the end result. But what they're missing, and this is where I think you're talking about having a succession mindset, when everyone understands how to get there and how their role relates to that pathway of getting there, and then they understand what success looks like as a result of doing those things. I think that's where you get that absolute clarity of role and purpose. But then you also you also highlighted, what each role looks like. What each role looks like with regards to what good looks like. So then there's that cross visibility in a team around processes and functions within the team, within the roles, within the macro process. Would you also suggest that in order to enable people to get an experience of perhaps the next layer or the next role up, that the leaders from time to time, purposefully step out of that role to enable other people to come in to get that experience without having to leave that role? How do you, what are some of the things that you put into practice or that you suggest to your clients?
That is a good question. I think there is, before we go on to that, something else I wanted to say. The thing around the role clarity, and I guess everybody knowing what good looks like, it's everyone's mindset should be, if I'm not in this seat tomorrow, can somebody else step in and do my work? And that's the mindset that sits with the succession thinking, but more at that individual role level in all parts of the organisation. And now going back to this question around developing leadership. I think because you have everything mapped out so well, and the spirit of the way that the leaders, in the leader shaping process, the spirit of how leadership operates here, it's easier for, I call it grow your own leadership team. And that can be having, we're all familiar with mentoring and what mentoring is about. This is actually allowing somebody else to be your apprentice, if you like. And they can be your apprentice for one day, they can be your apprentice for a week, they can be your apprentice for a year. Because not only it's not a case of just shadow me and you learn the job. It's, here you go, we've got role clarity at my level too. Here's the accountabilities of this role. This is what the person profile looks like. This is what success measures are. These are the systems. Okay, where would you like to start? Which part interests you first? So you've got something to actually go to that person and go, right, okay, what is it? Do you want to learn the systems of the role? Do you want to learn what it's like to be in a leadership team meeting? What are my accountabilities and how I report on that? What is it that you want? And you can bring the entry point for a trainee can be at multiple places.
Yeah.
Which allows so much variety in the way that you develop somebody in the way that they want to be developed, versus here's my training program, let's just do this. Although you have a rough training program if you wanted to, aligned to that, transitions stuff, but it allows you to, the role clarity allows you to have multiple entry points. But also, I would say that, going back to my earlier point, if I'm not in the seat and you were in my team and Ingrid, you said to me, Kay, I really want to do your role, I'd be like, okay, we'll give it a go. I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks. Do you want to deputise for me? I'll spend some time just letting you know what the kind of things I do. We have a system. The system is all mapped out on a tech platform as well. And the tech platform will guide the person through. And it'll also let them know when their meetings are, which meetings they have to go to. It'll let them know what they have to produce for those meetings, where to get that information from, who they need to speak to, who's accountable for what part of the process. It's all mapped. So very little room for error.
Yeah, I think that's I really, again, appreciated, pardon me, what you said about, the multiple entry points into, where they'd like to start with respect to, undertaking that apprenticeship, so that they do get an experience at a really thorough and competency-based level of enacting what that role looks like, because they're clear about all of the different processes within that role that make it what it is, and then providing them opportunity to fulfill that role, whether that be with holidays or maybe taking a day off.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you talked about the multiple entry points, but I think there's an opportunity also for people outside of your immediate kind of team to see, what does this role actually look like, and is that something that I aspire to, and would I want to do this, and how can I orchestrate this? Often I guess in a larger entity, it's like the role comes up and you make an application, and then there's a bit of a honeymoon period of finding out how it's great, and then what is it this role really like. Yeah. With the succession mindset, you're much closer to the roles, and if you want to be, you can be really close down to a granular level to know how they work, what the components are, and what competencies actually make this role successful, and yes, how I might want to get involved with that. Absolutely. Versus making a straight application for an opportunity that exists.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's not often that the word competency is used with leadership, I might add. And so, again, I really appreciate... No, well, it's not. And I know you're laughing, but it's not. It's used with roles... I mean, I'm very familiar with sales competencies and sales leadership competencies, mapping out what good looks like from a behavioural and an action perspective with respect to those two roles in particular. But outside of that, leadership is deemed as, kind of one of those skills that, yes, you can go to uni, you can learn that, you can do, graduate courses in leadership, you can go and become a coach, you can do all of these things, but rarely is it spoken about in practical terms around competency with respect to the doing on an everyday level, so that people can actually, rather than knowing the theory, enact a role, a leadership role to a high degree of success, quite easily, whether that's the actual leader or the apprentice leader.
Yeah, I think the word pragmatic comes to my mind when I'm working with clients or I'm having conversations. I talk about translating high level concepts, MBA type concepts, into actual pragmatic solutions that a business can work with. And every business will be at different stages of that lens, I would call it. But if you can't make things pragmatic in a business, and my question to you as an owner or a leader is, why are you doing it? If it's just because a McKinsey report told you this is what you should do, then my question to you is, how do you know that's the right thing for your business?
That's it. That's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that struck me in our initial conversation when we first met was your view of building a solid pipeline of leadership, in the businesses, building that capability. And you've beautifully articulated today how, on a pragmatic level, that can be realised in a business. And so I very much appreciate that, because there'll be lots of business owners listening to this podcast who'll be thinking, well, okay, so what does that actually mean? And what you've done is you've beautifully outlined, that pathway. Now, you probably get a lot of calls saying, can you help me do that? But I just wanted to highlight some statistics here, because I came across, in the preparation for this podcast and for some of the others, There were some statistics that were cited about the pressures that organisations are finding in 2025. And one of the things that they were saying was, with respect to the leadership pipeline, organisations everywhere are struggling. They're saying that organisational approaches to leadership development and preparation are falling short. And DDI in 2025 has cited the following statistics. And I just, you know how we talked about a couple of those competencies, I wanted to cite them here. So it says here, according to leaders, future-oriented capabilities are simultaneously their most critical and also their most underdeveloped skills as leaders. So the first one was setting strategy. 64% of leaders identify as an essential leadership skill, yet only 37% have received training. That's terrifying. Managing change, 61% of leaders see it as critical, but only 36% have been developed in that area. And then the other one, decision making and prioritisation, 60% of leaders, again, deem it critical, but only 39% have received training. From the work that you do, setting strategy, managing change, decision making and prioritisation, they talk about receiving training there, but what you're talking about is far deeper and wider than just training. You're talking about providing pathways into those three key areas around competency building here. So again, if I was a business owner listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, how do I build a strategy competency in my emerging leaders? How do I help them to manage change in those emerging leaders? And how do I help them with their decision making and their prioritization around what good looks like? How would you help your clients to foster those next levels of skill set in their apprentice leaders?
I'm going to take you right back to the succession thinking approach.
Yes.
Because in that space, the first one where you're talking about strategy, you're building the strategy with these leaders. My position is that these guys have never done strategy before. So how do I take them through an exercise, help them do this and hold their hand, and help them understand when they're going wrong? So coaching really that's when my coaching really comes to the fore, because I'm helping them. I'm not teaching the theory of doing strategy. I'm helping them build the business strategy and learn it as they're doing it, but in a controlled training environment.
Yes.
So it's hands-on, do it. Well, this is what we're doing, brick by brick, if you want to call it that. This is the front end of a strategy. How does a strategy come together? What are the essential elements? Okay, right, let's build this part. Let's build this part. Let's build that part. And now how do they interplay with one another? So think of it as this way. If I'm that business owner building the strategy and saying to you, here, deliver this strategy, you're never going to have buy-in to this, are you? You're going to think, oh, that's just something that's, it's been built. I just have to kind of do X, Y, and Z towards this. But the leadership team are building a strategy. You're building their capability of thinking about, oh, this is what strategy is. This is how I build this. That's the element that comes in. This is the reason why it comes in. So you're actually educating them as you're building it with them. But then there are going back to the key things a business has: vision, values, purpose, all those things, right? What lots of businesses don't do, they have them as posters and they have them in their pitch decks. What they don't do is use them as a decision-making framework for their business. So here, in your strategy, you're asking yourself your question: does this help? Does this one thing that we're trying to do align with the vision of this business? They'll be the owner's vision, right? Does this operate in our niche area, in our specialism? Is it better than our competitors, or is it competing with our competitors? Where are we best positioned in terms of our capability, our skill set, our resource, our finances? So these are all questions we help them understand. These are essential components when you're building a strategy, and then help them go, right now, ask yourself the questions. And are they in? Are they out? Are they kind of in? Are they not? And then that starts shaping parts of the strategy. And then they land on, we talked about, the goals of departments and the goals of the business, and they land at those, and then they cascade them for each function. But the fact is that the values, the vision, all of those purpose, they're actually a decision-making lens, and we help them use that to make intelligent decisions about the business and whether they're the right one. And then there's a second tier around the roles and the guidance for each role, or the guidance for a function. We know what good looks like for a particular function, for sales, marketing, and if we're making these decisions, will it hit the goals that we want for that particular function? Will it hit the what good looks like marker? If it doesn't, then we should ask ourselves another question: why are we doing it?
Right.
And if not now, would we do it ever? Okay, we wouldn't do it now. We might do it next year because we might have better capability. The traction of the business might be better. The product might have better traction. We might have a bigger workforce. There's all sorts of elements. But the fundamental thing is that everything is anchored back to what the things that the business has created that provides guidance. I call it, in our world, we call it stewardship. You're stewarding the resources of the business. And when you're doing that, and you do it in a way where you've got the great questions are being asked, you're looking at the right things, it'll automatically steer you to the things that you should put your attention on. They then become the strategy of the business. And then they cascade into okay, if we've got those 5 big goals, and we know what those 5 goals look like for each of the functions, because we know we've already done the questioning, we've got some guidelines about what good looks like. We now know, all right, which one needs to go first? All right, that's the first quarter's objective. All right, that's the first objective. Well, how do we know what good looks like for that objective if it's achieved? All right, let's get some key results now down. So again, it's going back to the pragmatic way of building this, and it anchors all the way back into, we make decisions that are aligned with our vision, values, purpose.
Yep.
And what we already know what good looks like for each of our areas. Does it satisfy those things? And we also, as part of the strategy building, we look at the external environment and what's happening there, and how does that position us? If we took that lens and we did that other third level review, does that sit, or does that position as well? Okay, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. Right, we might not do that now. So it's a slower building. It's an educating process. It's a full 2 days that I spend with a business doing this. But before that, I've spent a lot of time getting the leadership team together and gelling them together before we do this. But then it's an annual. I see them quarterly for a long time to do this work and to make sure it stays on track. So, and they're clear about decision making because they know why they're making decision. It's not like, oh, what's the finger up in the air? I think we'll just make that decision today. It's anchored in the reality of the business and the goals and the vision of the business.
Yes. I think that's the thing that's resonated through this whole thing is, about building that capability, that pragmatic approach. It's all anchored in reality. I love how you said that. It's anchored in the reality of the business and the priorities of the business and the results that it needs to get. Now, Kay, before we wrap up, I can't believe we've been speaking for nearly an hour, but before we wrap up, you mentioned that you've got a podcast. Now, tell us a little bit about the podcast. Tell us about the title of the podcast, where we can find the podcast, and a little bit about what it covers.
Right, my podcast is called The Quiet Executive, and it probably doesn't resonate so well as an obvious podcast name, but the reason why I named it that is because there's lots of good thinking happening in the small private business entity world. And it's what I would call at that executive level, but the executive word is normally associated with corporate. So it's my kind of ode to a lot of great work happens at that executive level in private and small business. And I chose the word quiet is because it's all understated work that happens behind the hood. It's not in PR articles, it's not on stages, but some amazing businesses and great family offices have been built off the back of private entity. And it's the, we talked about succession thinking, we talked about the way of building leadership capability. It's the, when I've been inside a client and I've had a particular issue, it's like, how do I bring this issue to more small business and medium business owners or leaders who might understand this thing might resonate to them, and it might help them think differently. It might help them build a succession mindset. It might help them navigate their own owner or leader evolution in a slightly different way. And that's why, I put my kind of strap line underneath that is less ego, more evolution, because it's all about your evolution as an owner, as a leader, and the evolution of your business. At the moment, up till now, it was a private podcast that it was only accessible to a private community, but I'm about to launch it in July on Spotify. So everybody can have access to that. So as of July, you'll be able to access it. It's called The Quiet Executive. And off the back of that, I actually run a Quiet Executive Circle.
Great. Well, I want links to everything. We will include in our show notes, because if the Quiet Executive podcast is anything like this conversation, I will be listening like no tomorrow, because it just sounds like it will offer so many words of wisdom around the practical application of some of these success factors that you've helped businesses implement. And it talks about real stories, that we might not get anywhere else apart from these conversations. So I have no doubt that people that have really loved this conversation will also want to listen to that. So I'm glad that you're not just making it exclusive, that you are allowing everyone to get access to that. Where else can people find you, Kay?
They can find me on LinkedIn, as ever, like most people can. Kay Solanki on LinkedIn. The actual practice, my private practice, is called Coachtique. So coachtique.com, you can find me there too. They're the main places at the moment you can find me at.
Absolutely fantastic. I could have gone on, and I thought, hold yourself back. Kay, I have loved every minute of our conversation today. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise and experience. It's so thorough, and it just oozes from you. And I'm very, very grateful for our conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ingrid.
Okay, you've been listening to The Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard. And to find out how the Sales Doctor can help your organisation to transform its revenue, growth and profit, visit us on our website at www.thesalesdoctor.com.au. I look forward to your company next episode. Bye for now.